like, fuck it. The world's gone to shit. It's burning. Let's get some petrol. Let's throw some more on.
That's Hannah Cox. She's running across India to raise £1 million for climate-affected communities.
I have to run 100 marathons in 100 days, traversing the old inland customs line. That customs line is a huge symbol of taking resources without considering the people that it's most acutely affecting. It's a symbol of consuming we take more than we need. As someone that works in sustainability, I see this happening a lot.
What we're saying with, what's your project sort of like, what's your action? Really, what's your physical action that you're taking to make the world a better place? It's a bit terrifying now because we might fail. We've been working on it for a year. We've still got so much to do before we leave, and we leave in 3 months. But we have to keep...
Just one quick thing before we get into the episode. This podcast is brought to you by Ecology, the UK's most trusted climate action platform. They help businesses to reduce their emissions, restore our planet, and report their progress for every step of their climate journey. If you'd like to learn more, check them out with the link in the show notes. Let's get on with the episode. Hannah, thank you very much for joining me on the Climate Unfuck podcast. I want to jump in and get started by asking what you think is most over or underrated in the sustainability and climate world.
Okay, controversial opinion, I'm sure. Your business's carbon footprint.
Interesting. Why'd you say that?
Because I think it's very relevant if you have a business with if you're a product-based business, I think looking at your carbon footprint and being able to measure it is really important. I think when you're a smaller company, professional services, a small team, the priority on either of those anyway should be, is your business useful and creating something positive for people and planet? Because if your business is neither of those things, it doesn't really matter what your carbon footprint is. Like, do you see what I mean? Like, it's kind of like if the business is bad, then just don't have the business, and then it's got no carbon footprint. If the business is good, but you're spending all your time measuring your carbon footprint and unable to do the good stuff, then why are you measuring it? I don't know. Like, I say that as somebody that I understand it has its place. I just don't think measuring your carbon footprint is super relevant for every single business.
So that's really interesting because I think a lot of people just dive straight into wanting to measure the carbon footprint without actually considering the business itself. Have you work with businesses with Better Not Stop to help them do B Corp and to generally become more sustainable? How, if you're working with a business that maybe would be better off not existing, how do you actually approach that? Like, it's quite a difficult thing to say to the founder of that business, I guess.
Yeah, it is. But also, those aren't really the kind of businesses that we work with. I have been in a situation where we've worked with businesses who we felt had the right intentions. And then when we started working with them, realizing their values didn't align with us, and then we stopped working with them. We've had businesses approach us wanting to become B Corp certified, but when we kind of delved a little bit under the hood, turns out they were doing it more for the kind of certification rather than the values of B Corp. So it's really hard to judge that. A lot of it's based on gut feeling. But we tend not to have the types of businesses who aren't doing it for the right reasons approach us. I don't think that's almost not the marketing. That's not the vibe that we give off as a company, that we're there to help you greenwash. We'll only work with people that we know have the best intentions to do good work. And when it comes to things like carbon footprint, I'll be clear. I think it's very important that everybody understands climate change. I think it's important that businesses teach their staff carbon literacy and that people are confident understanding what scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions are. But in regards to actually measuring that within the business and focusing on that as their sole way to basically like see whether they're sustainable or not, I don't think that's particularly true. Is it more important for a huge factory creating loads of products to measure their carbon footprint than a professional services businesses with 5 people, yes, it's probably more important for them too, but it's more about knowing what it means and how relevant it is to your company. But also, should your business exist anyway, is a big question that people should be asking, because there's lots of businesses out there that we don't really need to exist, and they do.
Mm. Yeah, it's I've thought this about Shein, and like being able to buy things at like very, very extremely unreasonably low prices kind of creates an expectation from the market that that is normal, and that being able to buy a t-shirt for like £1 or £2, um, but it's quite. I think it's also quite hard to balance that with like people have free will. And like you can't kind of stop someone from setting up a business.
It's also the responsibility also probably of government to not allow those types of businesses to exist. I mean, in Manchester, I think, we've got big companies like Shein building headquarters here from a city that is saying it's also trying to be one of the most sustainable net zero cities in the UK. And it's like, well, you can't have one with the other. So you have to pick. Some things are quite black and white when you talk about business. Some are more grey. That's the difficulty about sustainability, as you know, and this probably a lot of stuff you talk about in the podcast. Um, but the reality is, if you are buying a t-shirt for £1, that someone along that journey is getting fucked over. Like,
Yeah,
it might not be you as a consumer, you're getting a pound t-shirt, but there's something along the way for that to have been created. Someone and something is getting fucked over, and that is both people and the planet,
yeah.
because there is a true cost of everything, and it's not just the financial cost of it.
What have you learned? So impact businesses, what we're kind of saying in a way is that impact businesses have to operate in a different way, in maybe the sense that they how they approach bringing something to the market. So what have you learned about the kinds of about impact businesses, and which ones seem to kind of fail and succeed, and maybe why that is? Because I feel like you'll have a really interesting perspective on that, knowing so many businesses.
Well, I mean, and I will say this as somebody who is not perfect, and I think sometimes that's where the difficulty often lies in this space. Is there's some very, very vocal people at both ends, saying that you need to be a certain way to be a sustainable business or an impact driven business. I actually think every business has the ability to do that. All businesses are run by people, and it's the morals and the ethics of the people running those companies. For me, I worked in a job that this was just not relevant to me at all till my 30s. I'm 41 now, but things like the cost and the impact of the work I was doing on other people and the planet and supply chain, it just didn't cross my mind. And whether you want to call that me being ignorant, or the information wasn't as readily available then as it is now, but I've had to educate myself on a lot of this. And the difficulty around sustainability and impact driven business is it is a bit of a Pandora's box. You think you're doing well in one place, then suddenly you're not. I mean, if you get into the depths of it, it's things like, oh, actually you can't, rice is actually very like, if we talk about food as an example, I'll become vegan, but actually, if you eat a lot of rice is really unsustainable, and avocados are really unsustainable as well. And where are you actually getting your food from, and has it got pesticides on it, and all of this? And then it basically, every part of this opens loads of other doors of difficulty, I think, as a consumer and as a business owner. I think if people are coming at it from a place of wanting to do better and actively educating themselves in the best way they can, with what they have in their wheelhouse at the moment, and trying to push themselves a bit further, that's a good place to be. That's the kind of Better Business Network ethos. We'll take businesses, any industry, any sector, any size, any stage in their impact journey. But all we ask for businesses who join the network is a willingness to educate themselves, learn more, and try and put some practices in place in their company to measure a positive impact. But it's difficult because there's so many things to be considering in that, as you well know, that it's hard for people to decide what things they need to be focusing on, which is in the network, what we try and do is signpost them to the things that are most useful for them and their business.
That's a perspective. I think what you said about you came to this when you were 30 and you didn't know anything about it. I was in a similar position. I hadn't really thought about it, and then an experience made me want to learn a lot more about it and ignited my passion that's got stronger since. What do you feel like in those that first year, say, you could have really benefited from that you didn't have, or that you learned and you wish that you'd learn maybe later on down the line? Because I feel like quite a lot of people are at that stage where they have some awareness of it, but they haven't really taken steps down the road. And that first step is often the hardest, or the first few.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's really one of the reasons I started the network, because I couldn't find that community that was inclusive, because it felt like the communities that did exist were already quite far ahead on their journey, or there was an expectation that to be part of that community, you needed to be prepared to make some really big changes in your life. You know, whenever I meet people, even now, and I've been lucky enough to kind of be on this like proper journey of sustainability and impact for about 6 years, I'd say, is and when they've got no kind of concept or care, it, for me, there's a bit of empathy, because I'm like, well, I've been there. I didn't have any concept or care before
Me
either.
too.
So I totally get that. You don't, and that's fine. But also meeting people where they're at. I mean, I have not got, let's just say, for example, kids that I'm helping, you know, you know, like, nurturing as a parent, which takes up a lot of time. I've got more free time to be doing these sorts of things as an adult. So it's about it's also thinking about, okay, it's not really so much about judging other people where they're at, because actually anyone who's in the sustainability space, I'd say like 99% of us didn't grow up like this. We've gone and kind of sought out the knowledge ourselves. So we need to be a bit more accepting of people who are not where we are, because it's not a them and us. They are us, just a little bit further away than we are. Um, but yeah, I wanted that community. That's the thing. And this is what I love about the Better Business Network is it definitely feels to me, I'm learning every day from members, but also people don't feel judged when they're asking questions or they're needing help. I think everyone does come at it from a place of, yeah, I've been there before. It is hard. Do you get an electric car, or do you just keep your old car, or do you not have a car at all? And we have people in the network at all different stages of where they are at, whether they fly or whether they don't fly, or whether they vegan or plant-based, or whether they have strong political views that they show through their business and their work, or whether they keep that separate for their personal life. We have a complete mix, and I think that's what helps other people feel that they can come and give their opinions and thoughts as well.
I think something that, I mean, it applies to all areas of life, but I feel like, especially in sustainability, can become very like siloed and insular and echo chambery. And when I've been to Better Business Network events, it feels like you're not kind of being judged for being further down the journey, like not as far along the journey. How did you kind of create that atmosphere? Because I've heard you speak before about you've had it where some people came into the network and it didn't, and they were trying to be very like exclusive, and if you're not doing these things, then you're not part of the group. How have you kind of intentionally curated that?
I don't think it's intentional. I think it's more that's the vibe we give off as an organization. I'm quite honest about the things that we struggle with and mess up on as an organization, and I do as an individual. Um, and I think that transparency makes people feel more comfortable. And when we have had people in the network who are quite, I guess I would say, I don't know, kind of like too strict on their views and too judgmental on their views, they tend to find it's just not the place for them to be, because people don't agree with them, and people push back on that. I think when people are very judgmental of other people's situations, it never comes across well for that person. I'll give you an example of being at an event a few weeks ago with a friend who he ran from South Africa to London to track human migration, to tell that story. He'd been doing for years. He'd been doing a lot of running around, highlighting racism and how that affects people, and raising money for charity. His name's Deu Kato. He's based in London, and he's an Adidas runner. That's how he earns his money. He's a sponsored athlete. He does run clubs in London, taking people out who usually wouldn't have the opportunity to be part of those communities. He's part of Black Trail Runners. He's a huge advocate for inclusivity in the sport, but also inclusivity generally as a human being. He's a lovely guy. He's also a member of the Green Runners, which is a community for runners that care about the planet. And I was lucky enough to be on a panel with him at an event a few weeks ago. And he was asked by somebody in the audience, judged by somebody in the audience. It wasn't a question. It was one of those, we've all been to those panels where someone doesn't ask a question, they just want to tell you something. And a woman in the audience said, well, I just don't think you should be sponsored by Adidas. And you shouldn't be using Instagram as a platform. It's Meta, and you're supporting the genocide in Gaza by doing so. And it was a really aggressive, ignorant statement that this woman was making for two reasons. One, she wasn't asking a question, which could have been, I've heard some bad things about Adidas. How do you marry that up with the work you do with them? Or did you know about Instagram, and how does that feel to you? She'd obviously done no research on Dayu, because I would have just said something else, but the question was at Dayu, and he just very comfortably replied, I wouldn't be able to do the work I was doing if I didn't have the support of Adidas. And actually, by being within that organization, I'm able to have uncomfortable conversations with them about some of the challenges that they have through their sustainability. And I do that as a green runner. And actually, I've done a lot of work in the last 2 or 3 years to kind of help push the dial within that organization. But this woman didn't know that, because she didn't ask, she just assumed. And there is an element of, without being too religious, but he who's cast the first stone, it's like that judgment, it's just not the place to be, because you just don't know where everyone is. And actually, we need to be vocal in all situations, in all organizations. And we're in an imperfect system, and we've just got to be aware of that.
Yeah, I think that it stops a lot of people from getting started. You're helping businesses communicate about their impact. How do you kind of walk that line and also encourage people not to be scared to take the first step? Because often that's the one where there's the most, to lose potentially.
Yeah, well, I guess twofold, really. One, we work with a lot of businesses on something called a materiality assessment, which is when you look in that particular organization and you look at what are the most impactful things that particular business can do, what are the most impactful areas in which that business can instigate change. Now, I'll use the Better Business Network as an example. We have nature on the board. And when we put nature on the board as a director, we thought, where are the most impactful areas we can have as a business? And we recognized there were two things. One was how we travel, because we travel a lot in our company. It's where a lot of our time, resources, finances go on how we travel around the UK. So we were like, right, let's put in a really good the best travel policy we can for our organization. And then the second one was actually the second biggest impact we have is how we communicate and influence the members of the network, and how can we do that in a more positive way. And when you're not doing great stuff in other areas, it's about actually being quite comfortable saying, we don't do great here, and this is why we don't do great here, whether that's a financial reason, an operational reason, resource, time, whatever. I think with the baby with the bathwater thing, I get, but I also it makes me, when people are like that with me, it reminds me of toddlers when, you know, that age where like kids get to and they just are constantly asking you why. There's this age kids get to, like 3, 4 years old, and you'll say, "Oh, you can't do that," and they'll say, "Why?" And you'll be like, "Oh, because you're not allowed," and they'll say, "Why?" And then it just be why, and it's infuriating as an adult, but it's what the toddler's doing at that point is they're pushing that boundary, but also trying to understand how life works. Like, why aren't I allowed to do this? What is the reason behind that? And it does feel like a very like adult way, this sort of like, why bother? Why bother doing this if you're going to do that? And I just think, well, why bother doing anything then? Do you know what? Why bother trying to do anything good ever? Because let's all just give up. Should we all like, do you know what? Like, fuck it. The world's gone to shit. Let's just, it's burning. Let's get some petrol. Let's throw some more on. Like, it's just such a ridiculous suggestion to just let bad stuff happen and take away your own. It also is taking away a little bit of your own ability to make a difference. It's not very
Agency, yeah.
empowering, is it? To say,
No.
oh, well, just everything's shit, isn't it? So let's just leave it. And it's like, well, do you not think you're important? Because I think you're important and you should think you're important. And actually, by thinking you're not important, you're definitely not going to be important. So I'm definitely of the mindset, if you're trying to do good, that's the most important thing. And part of that is educating yourself, but part of that is being a bit kind to yourself and understanding you can't do everything and you're not going to be perfect. And if people want to pull stuff apart about me, I could give them a list of things I do that aren't sustainable, but I can also give you a list of things that I really try and do that are. But at least I'm trying to do something, which is a lot more than a lot of people, unfortunately. You know, it's about being
Yeah.
conscious of those choices, I think.
And forgiving to yourself and others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
I
a you thing. Let everybody else do their own thing. Like, do it. You just do the good
yeah.
stuff.
I really liked what you said about figuring out where you can have the most impact and where your business can. And you listed a couple, like a materiality assessment, and you listed travel and influence. Are there other factors that you can, like, is there a menu that you can choose from and say, I think this is where I can have the most impact?
Yeah. So a materiality assessment is actually a really fun workshop to do with a business that we do. And it involves you asking a business what they think their most important things are, and then finding out who the business stakeholders are, and then you ask the business stakeholders what they think the business's most important things are. And sometimes you'll get a Venn diagram of a few things matching up, but often a business will be surprised about what their most important things are, because it won't just be based on what they think it is, it will be based on what the people who are affected by the business also think it is. So, and if you look up materiality assessment online, you'll find lots of different ways in which you can pull that together for your business. But that kind of goes a bit back to the example of carbon footprint and climate shadow that we talked about earlier. Obviously, the carbon footprint of a business, if you are like a huge manufacturing company, you know, using up lots of fuel, water in your manufacturing process, that's probably going to be quite an important issue for you, not just from a climate change perspective of carbon emissions, but if you can reduce down your water and fuel usage, it's going to potentially
Us.
make your costs. It's going to be a financial decision, a commercial decision for your business. And that might actually be a really big thing big change you can make in your company. Um, so yeah, we always say, you know, it's working out what they're called material topics, very exciting. I like concept,
Like
but
lots of things in sustainability. Good.
yeah,
It's a really
exactly.
exciting
But
name.
exciting name, but it's like trying to work out which ones are yours, and therefore how are you going to try and measure those, and measure what you're doing in those areas. And there's a few different ways you can do that. There's something called the Global Reporting Standards, which is you can literally look it up around the sustainable development goals, and it tells you if you're trying to hit this sustainable development goal as a business, this is how you would measure it, because this is the reporting, the ways in which you report on that standard. Um, so yeah, there's loads of different ways to do it, and the information is there, and a lot of the information is free. It's resource, and businesses like Better Not Stop can come in and support, because we almost, you know, we're like plumbers, you know, we know where to put the screw in and turn the key or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess all of this is really around like how to think about impact, because I think the word impact is like thrown around quite a lot, but like, what does it mean to have impact? And I feel like looking at your journey, you started Better Not Stop. That was your business that, or the business that you started kind of turned into that in COVID. And then you started Better Business Network in COVID as well, because of feeling like you wanted this community of purpose-driven people. And now the kind of really big hairy goal is Project Salt Run.
Mm.
And I'm really intrigued from like the outside how much kind of the scale of the impact of those things weighs into the decision to do it. And do you think about like scale of impact beforehand and think, okay, like running a crazy distance and raising a crazy amount of money, like £1 million is your goal? Is that about how much of that decision is scale of impact?
That's a really good question. I think a big part of the decision for me is scale of impact. So for Better Not Stop, when I started that business, I was a freelancer, solo entrepreneur. And I thought, wow, I could go into big existing businesses that already have staff and help them create sustainable frameworks and strategies that's going to affect not only the people that work in that business, but who that business affects. And that felt to me like a huge step of influence that I could have as an individual. I then started the Better Business Network and thought, actually, if I shared this knowledge with other people that they could then implement it in their business without me having to be there, that could be an even bigger way that I could have an impact as an individual. So it went from things like me working individually with businesses on sustainable frameworks to creating things like the carbon literacy course that we teach to our members, that so that our members can then go into work within their businesses to improve what they're doing, and the courses that we have online, and just the creating an ecosystem for people to do that individually. Like there's a lots of conversations and connections and collaborations happening in the network that, I mean, all we've done is create an opportunity for that to happen. So it kind of feels like that's just been kind of the natural step up of like, how can this be beyond what I can do with my time as one person? I think Project Salt Run, it's a very personal story. It's a culmination of 10 years of an obsession with a hedge in India, which is the country that my dad's from. But it actually all worked and came together because around, April, May last year, beginning of last year, I was really thinking, I want to grow the network. I'm not sure what I'm doing with Better Not Stop, but I just feel like I want to do something big. Like I just felt like I just wanted to do something big, and I felt like nothing I was doing was moving fast enough. And I felt, yeah, that, and then Project Salt One kind of serendipitously came together. Um, and it's become a project that's almost outgrown me already. So
I'm really interested to ask more about it specifically, but just about like the decision to focus on Project Salt Run, because obviously the limited resource is time and attention, and you can put time and attention into Better Not Stop, Better Business Network, Project Salt Run. And if you look at it really utilitarian, it's like you're looking to put time and attention in and impact out. How do you, what made you think, or how did you decide that doing Project Salt Run and the time and attention and energy of that would, and I shouldn't think it was as utilitarian as this, but would kind of outweigh putting the same amount into the existing two? Because I think that's a very hard question for people to tackle for themselves. Like, do I focus on this new thing or this thing I've already got going?
yeah, well, I mean, it, to share the Project Salt One story in very quickly is within 4 days, it was not an idea, it became an idea, and then it was happening whether I liked it or not. Like literally the universe was like, this is happening whether you like it or not. And I was like, okay. And I quite quickly realized that I was already really busy and I wasn't quite sure how I was going to fit in this huge task, which is, 100 marathons in 100 days across a country that I don't know. Well, two countries that I don't know, to raise a insane amount of money for charity. Um, it became quite obvious quite quickly that the work I do with Better Not Stop was going to be the thing that got left behind. The reason for that is I could see the longer term vision with the Better Business Network as something that could have a much more scalable impact than Better Not Stop, and also something that would be able to continue to grow when I was not in the country and have the same amount of impact without me being here. A lot of the work I was doing in Better Not Stop was one to one with businesses, client work. And while I could have created an agency with loads of consultants and all of that, it didn't feel to me that that was what I was put here to do. And there's loads of people doing that and they're doing it great. So I didn't need to kind of do it too. With Project Salt Run, it has become, and it's if anything, it's a bit terrifying now because we might fail. We've been working on it for a year. We've still got so much to do before we leave, and we leave in 3 months. But we have to keep talking about it like we're doing it. Otherwise, it's definitely not going to happen. And similar to what we were, talking about earlier in the podcast, um, whether you say you can or you can't, you're right, as Henry Ford says. So, if I'm sat here saying, "Oh, I can't do anything, I can't make a difference, there's nothing I can do as an individual," then that's going to be the case. But it's a little bit sticking my neck out, saying, "I'm going to do this thing, and I don't really know how I'm going to do it, but I'm telling everyone I'm going to do it, and I'm doing everything I can think of to make it happen, and it still might not happen." But if the worst is that it doesn't happen, then I'm kind of all right with that because I think it will. Like I think something is going to happen. I'm just not sure what yet. But I, f- we have to have the belief we can make a difference. Otherwise, it again goes back to what's the point of any of it? For me, anyway.
You said in a post about running coast to coast, something changed in me. And I feel like that's coming through in what you're saying right now. And what is that? And have you always thought like this?
No, no, I haven't always thought like this. I would say was relatively confident in my work ethic and my ability to do a good job throughout my 20s. As you know, I was quite confident I was a competent person. If you asked me to do something, I'd be able to do it. I'd always do my best. I knew I could do really well. I knew that because I've been continued to be employed by the same people, been in the same sort of like circles, recommended for work. So I knew that. As an individual, though, of like who I was as a person, I wasn't particularly confident at all. And from a physical point of view, I think, a year ago I was like 15 kilos heavier, didn't do any exercise because I didn't really pay that much attention to myself. I just focused all of who I was on almost my work output. Um, and Project Salt One is a very personal thing, and it is a person saying they can do a thing and showing I have belief in myself. It's been challenging. Um, for example, we did the coast to coast and I finished that still not knowing how we were going to do Project Salt Run, but feeling confident if I can just run the width of England, which a year ago I did not run, I can definitely run across India. There was this weird confidence in me post coast to coast, which was I've done a week, I can I can do 100 days. I was like, I'm convinced, like from a physical point of view and a mental resilience point of view, I'm pretty confident I can do that as a challenge. How to raise the money to do the challenge, how to make it possible that my business is sustainable while I'm away, still not there, but I'm not going to be there without just continuing to put the work in. Um, So yeah, I would say it's been hard because, for example, we've just talked about it on our podcast recently. Our documentary filmmaker is now unable to come out to India. He was unable to commit to the 100 days in the country, so therefore he can't come out. That was kind of a non-negotiable of him being part of the project. And there has been people along the way that have been part of Project Salt One and are no longer part of Project Salt One, or who I thought would be supportive and haven't been supportive. But then I've also had loads of people who I didn't think would be very supportive, who are super supportive. And I've also had people who I didn't even think knew what I was doing come up to me and say, I know you're going to do it. I'm really confident you're going to do it. And yeah, it's all a big belief piece at the moment. And how wonderful would it be if we make it happen?
Incredible. Yeah, I have a shitload of respect because yeah, I've done some semi long distance stuff, but not for multiple days, and that is 100 days is a whole unfathomable.
Yeah.
What made you want to do a running event? Because I feel like you said, and I see in the Project Salt Run media that you describe yourself as you're not a runner, or you weren't into running. Like, why pick a running event?
I think it's because I think it's going back a little bit to that perfectionism thing that you and I were talking about earlier, which is people can do hard things. We just need to go for it. And I just thought, I could walk it. It would take me bloody ages, but I could walk it. But actually, there's something in it being a physically difficult challenge, an endurance challenge, which it's kind of a little bit like putting my money where my mouth is. It's all very good saying, you know, we can do hard things, people can be better. It's like I'm kind of saying, look, I'm going to do a really hard thing for me, and I know it's going to be really hard, and it doesn't actually probably matter how much I train, it's still going to be really, really difficult and challenging, not just from a physical aspect, but from a mental resilience aspect. I know a lot of endurance athletes say a huge part of it is mental, because it isn't about being perfect at something. It's about just trying to do something to make a difference. So part of it was showing that anybody, if they can put their mind to it, can do something difficult. And I say that as a 41-year-old who is not an athlete and still wouldn't call themselves a runner. But
You
if I
wouldn't call
could,
yourself a runner,
I still wouldn't call myself a runner.
Hannah. You ran across fucking England.
I know, but I just like at the moment, for example, I'm doing this 20 challenge, and I think, God, if I hadn't told everybody I was doing it, I wouldn't be running this morning. I'd have had a lie in and got the training, I so it's the element of progress, not perfection, of telling that story, I think, around the fact that it's a run. But it's also just about kind of movement can be a message, moving in a certain way is a message, and I think, Gandhi did the Salt March, and not that I'm comparing myself to Mahatma Gandhi at all. So it's like so don't say that at all. But there's something
I'll
in
clip that bit.
Yeah, there's something in movement. It's a protest. Movement is a protest, and for me, running it is. It's kind of saying, you know what, this is a hard thing we're trying to talk about, we're trying to discuss, we're trying to shine a light on. But what we're trying to do with Project Salt Run is shine a light on all the positive things that are happening, both in India with the businesses that are supporting Project Salt Run, with the communities which we're going to meet. We're trying to create a message of positivity and hope, not a negative message. That's the whole kind of point of the challenge.
That's such a good phrase. Movement can be a message. What do you think? I've seen you say a couple of times, people encouraging people to find their own Project Salt Run. And I don't think you mean movement just as in like physically moving necessarily, doing some kind of sport, but also taking action in some way. What have you seen other people's because I think it's really inspiring. It makes me think of like, what's my Project Salt Run? What have you seen, or what have people told you about of their Project Salt Runs, or other examples of these kinds of huge, big, hairy goals?
The thing is, it depends what a huge, big, hairy goal is for you. So,
Mm,
what we're saying with, what's your project sort of like, what's your action really? What's your physical action that you're taking to make the world a better place? Because it's all, I think there's a lot of conversations, there's a lot of talking, but what actually physically are you doing to make the world better? And I say that as in, it doesn't mean like, oh, I'm going to run across a country. But if you're physically, for example, spending your day to day creating a business that makes the world a better place, that's you physically doing something. That's an action, a physical action you're taking. So it's, for me, it's like, you know, we can all talk, we can all sit around in the pub, we can all like, you put the world to rights, but actually what physical action are you taking to make the world better? That's what you need to think about. And I also think it's about kind of pushing a little bit beyond what you think is possible
your
for
comfort
you.
zone.
Yeah, outside your comfort zone. So I've often talked about like, what part of the puzzle are you? The world is huge. There's so many problems to solve. There's so many challenges. We've all got different backgrounds, different interests, different things that we could be involved in. So it's like, where do you fit in the puzzle? Like, what's the bit that you're going to help with? Because it might be completely different to the bit that I'm helping with. And also, how do you kind of push yourself a little bit out of that comfort zone? So you're going a bit beyond what you think is possible for you. Um, because like I said, I would not have thought it was possible for me to run across a country a year ago. And even now, I'm like, God, that was last month. That feels so mad that I ran across England last month and I just turned up to work on the Monday. And I've just been talking about it since, it just feels like really like crazy. Um, but that wouldn't have been possible if I hadn't had the Project Salt Run team around me. 6 people gave up their week. You know, Mike, who was filming the documentary, gave up his van. Like everyone gave up their time and their resources for a week for that, for me, singular, to run across the country. So I think it's about what's the physical action and who are the people you're going to surround yourself with to hold you accountable for doing that. Maybe that's the Better Business Network. Maybe that's your friends. Maybe it's the community, the local community where you are. But it's kind of putting that stake in the ground and saying, this is my goal. This is what I want to do. I'm showing up. Like, who's going to help me? Because that's basically what I've done with Project Salt Run. And it definitely is not a singular person going through this. There's a whole group of us still involved in the project, and it wouldn't happen without any of them.
Mm, yeah, it's. I heard you say that you've as has gone on, you've looked for where you can group together with other people and to create the impact that you want. And I think I at least make the mistake, and I think a lot of people do. They focus on them, which is good. You have to start with yourself, your own actions. But then I think a lot of people then think that they shouldn't, that the next answer isn't collaborating with people, and actually that we are only going to have any kind of meaningful, sizable change by working with other people in some form or another.
I think the only way is collaborating with each other. That's like the only way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, true. Do you think a lot of impact businesses or people who you come across, or even people who are maybe interested but not taking action, do you think that they don't see that collaborative aspect as being as important? Is that a difference
I
between?
think people are just afraid to put themselves out there, in any aspect, right? It's uncomfortable to put yourself out of your comfort zone. It's uncomfortable to say, I don't know how I'm doing something. Can someone help me as an adult? Um, I I see this actually in people entering the workforce. A lot of people younger, still some people older who still have not learnt this lesson, that still think asking for help is a form of weakness, or saying you don't know how to do something is a form of weakness. It certainly took me probably till my late 20s, early 30s to realize if I did not know how to do something or I needed some help, I just needed to ask for some help. Because there before I felt like, oh, if I ask for help, everyone's going to know I don't know what I'm doing. Or if, or like, this like that'll make me look really bad if they've said something and I haven't quite understood it. But actually, it's showing willingness to learn. And I think that being able to say that you need help is really is is a sign of strength, I think. And also, what's the worst that's going to happen is someone's going to say, I'm not going to help you. And then you're like, okay, well, still in the shit place that I was before. Do you know what I mean? Like Project Salt One, prime example. I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to run across India. Like, can anyone help? And then sometimes I'll put out an Instagram, Instagram or a LinkedIn, and I'll get nothing back. It'll be like crickets, and I'll be like, oh shit, no one can help. And then sometimes someone will send me a message going, oh yeah, shit, saw your post. I can help you with this. Like, let me help you out. Because also it feels so good to help people. Like helping others is such a fulfilling feeling. We all know that when we've helped anybody do something, it makes you feel good. So I think it's, being comfortable saying you need help and not seeing it as a weakness, I think is something most adults do struggle with. I think that's quite fair to say. But with Project Salt Run and with the Better Business Network and everything I've done, I've just had to feel comfortable with that and also feel comfortable with failing and not succeeding at things because, that's also going to be part of
It's a
doing anything.
possibility.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think in life generally, but especially in the impact business space, one of these things that really turns people's toes up is the word money. And I read a post of yours that said, my inbox is out of control, my bank account is empty, and I'm scared about money, and I'm trying to hold it all together while building something that matters. And two of those things were about money. And I think that impact businesses, especially, like I've heard you talk about financing the Better Business Network with Better Not Stop. How do you think about, well, firstly, like practically, how did you make the decision to funnel all the profits from Better Not Stop into Best Business Network? And then I'll ask the other one.
Yeah. So, I mean, money's never been a huge motivator for me. I read a really great quote. I don't know who it's by, but they were like, profit is the fuel, not the destination. And I loved that. I thought it was great because it's like what you need to keep going, but it's not the be all and end all. I don't think I'm particularly thick. I did really good in I did really good in my GCSEs, really good in my A levels, started a business when I was at uni. Like I can got some common sense, I can make money. But it's the money is not the motivator for me. The motivator is like how the work makes me feel and how much of an impact I think I'm making. That was different in my 20s because the impact I wanted to make was I wanted to work in events and I wanted to put on great music experiences for people, which is what I was lucky to do. And then whenever I made any money, I would go traveling because that's what I wanted to do. Um, and I could have spent less time traveling and more time on my career in my 20s, and my career probably would have got a lot further and I probably would have earned more money, but I wouldn't have had any of the travel experiences that I wanted to have in my 20s, which I was lucky enough to enjoy. And I think for Better Not Stop and the Better Business Network, I always saw the potential of the Better Business Network as something that could make a real difference and was a real need for small business owners and larger businesses as an entry level sustainability impact kind of area for them. So for me, why wouldn't I use the money that I did have to try and grow that into something and create something special? The difficulty has been now that I'm not really doing Better Not Stop. We've got like 2 projects we're finishing off, which will both kind of be over at the end of this month, of how to then, make that sustainable. But I also, you know, it is difficult because I deliberately started the business as a limited company because I didn't want to be a CIC or a charity. I wanted to show that you can be profitable and be impactful at the same time. And yes, it is difficult. And I'm sure someone cleverer than me could probably have made it work better than I have. I've done my best with what I've had. Um, it's just not the be all and end all. I think as long as you're paying your bills and you're earning enough money to pay your own personal bills, like how much money I take home has never been the most important thing to me. Yes, I would like to have some more money. Yes, I entered the Amaze draw yesterday hoping that I'll win a house and a quarter of £1 million and I won't have to worry about anything next week. But it is like, it's just part of it. It's just, all of it is just part of it. Like, if you make money the most important thing in your life, your money will be the most important thing in your life. The reality of life is the most important thing is your time. How do you want to spend
Mm,
your time? How do you want to use your time? Um, how do you want to be impactful with the work that you do? I think time is the most important thing, and people forget that, and make out that money is, and just that's just not the case.
mm. I'm really interested what you said about you spent your 20s traveling, um, because we've talked about how it can help break you out of your silo. In terms of like people kind of looking up from whatever they're doing and kind of seeing the world, what I'm interested in is how important do you think that is? How much do people need to do it that they're not doing it? Because I think that you've spent like a long time getting out of your silo, and then it makes you really able to relate to people who don't think in the same way.
Yeah. I mean, it's from a huge place of privilege being able to travel as much as I traveled in my 20s. And I totally understand that and respect that and know that that opportunity isn't available for most people. I put down my probably want to work in impact down to actually all the travel that I did to realize actually how lucky I was to be born in the UK with, while we all, piss and moan about everything going on in the UK, like actually, if you go to like, a lot of other countries, we've got it pretty good here, in regards to um what facilities we have, just, the NHS, public transport, education. It's not amazing. I know there's lots of things to moan about, but if you go to a lot of other countries, some of the opportunities that we have here are incredible. Even going to other countries as a woman and being treated at differently because I'm a woman, also being treated differently because I'm white. It's all of it is learning about the privileges that you're put in where you grow up. And I think that's always been very interesting to me because my dad is Anglo-Indian, moved here when he was 6, 7 years old. And I think, wow, my life could have been so different if my dad just hadn't moved to the UK. What if he hadn't moved to the UK and there's another universe in which he married my mum went to India and they ended up marrying in India and I grew up in that country, for example. So yes, there's lots of privilege with being able to travel. Um, there's also lots of privilege with having access to the internet now and, being able to see a lot of the stuff that, when I was younger, we just didn't have access to, um, knowing what was going on all over the world, which is both good and bad. Um, I think, yes, I think travel is important, but I think the most important thing is having a sense of the privilege of where you're from and also having a sense of um, wanting to understand and experience different cultures and also realizing that you are just the product of where you were brought up. And if you've been brought up somewhere else, your views would be different, perhaps your religion would be different, perhaps your family situation would be different, and challenging yourself with that a little bit as well, I think. And that goes back to being less judgmental about people if you have more of an understanding of their background and where they're from. So I think
Yeah.
that's what travel gave me. Just it made me a lot less judgmental of people because it just made me realize how different people can have it.
Mm. And it means that when you are, like we've talked about, kind of acting with imperfection or other people are, you have a lot more empathy for it because you realize that like if you were in their situation, then you would do the same.
Yeah, 100%.
Um, in terms of we've spoken about why, like, working with events, working with festivals, you kind of are able to create a very unusual space for behavior change. And I'm really intrigued. What when you work with an event, you're trying to, one of the main impacts of like, in terms of the emissions and the sustainability of an event is the attendees. And if you're trying to make the attendees of an event more sustainable, you're trying to change quite behavior, which is quite difficult. How do you go about that, and why do you think events are a good place for it?
Um, well, I've done if to delve into it. I've done a report that's available for free on our website. So if anyone actually wants to know the bells and whistles of how to create a sustainable event, you can go to the betternotstop.com website and download the More Than Music report. But I find it an interesting space because events, festivals, experiences are usually something people experience with friends, with family, with partners. It's something people do as for fun, something that they're taking themselves out of their day to day life for something different. Festivals specifically, people really take themselves into a completely different space, often camping. Um, you'll see them, wearing different clothes that they wouldn't usually wear down to Tesco's. And there's almost this sort of openness when people go to events of just ready to experience something new, especially when it comes to a festival, where people might go to see a particular band or one or two people they might really want to see. But actually what they'll experience at a festival is so much more than that. It's the atmosphere, it's the kind of cultural highlights, it's the comedy, it's the lighting, it's the walk around entertainment, it's the attitude of the staff there, it's the meeting people that they're camping with. It's really like community spirit. And it's what I love about that is people go into those events so open to having a new experience, to walking, going home on the Sunday or the Monday and being like, wow, I discovered a new band, or I made a new friend, or um, I discovered a new food that I like, because I went to a different food store. And when people are slightly open to that unity of change, that's a really exciting place to speak to them and communicate with them about um, positive positive change in regards to sustainability. It's a better place. Like, that's better than, like, those like people standing outside the train station when you're trying to get to work on a Monday and talk to you about something. You're going to be less open to them, more open when you're like chilling in a festival field and someone comes up and says, I want to have a chat. So there's that. You've kind of got people like I feel like slightly like relaxed and unfurled, ready to hear a bit of new information. Um, but how we approach it specifically at Kendall Calling is we look at their journey. We call it the customer journey. We're like, right, what's the journey of people coming into the event, and how can we make it easy, accessible, and cool? If we hit all three of those, we know we're onto a winner. But if we can hit two of them, we know it might work. And if we can only hit one, it's not great, but we'll do it anyway because it still nudges the dial. But ideally, we always want them to do, and we want something to be easy, accessible, and cool. And when we say accessible, budget friendly, easy, like, something that's like wouldn't have to go out of their way to do from a like financial point of view. And then cool, I even saying cool as a 41-year-old, I'm aware, is not even cool. Whatever kids cool nowadays, but something that makes them feel good by doing it, whether it makes them feel like good just like as a nice person, or if it makes them feel cool to do the good thing. Um, those are the touch points we look at when we're trying to get people involved in sustainability at festivals.
I love the checklist. So actions should be easy, accessible, and cool. What does to make people take a sustainable action? Could you give a few examples of ones that you've used, like real life ones in festivals?
Okay, so I'll give you an example of cups. Like a super easy one is cups at music festivals. So at there was just kind of a concept of like, never had thought of it before, just had paper cups. People are some kids would be collecting the cups and returning them back. But then actually realized it'd be way more sustainable if we started using plastic cups that could be reused over and over and over again from lots of points of view. One, if they're used enough times over and over again, they become more sustainable than than paper cups. Also, you don't have all the costs of clearing up the paper cups off the floor. If it's muddy, they get trodden in. You're then paying for the whole waste team to pick them up, clean them out, separate the waste. So there's lots of kind of elements to that as well. So we were like, okay, so let's use reusable cups at the festival. Great, nice and easy swap. Then saw that the main stage would empty out at the end of the night and they'd just be smashed all over the floor. So actually it wasn't more sustainable because now you've got a load of plastic shards all over the floor. And people are annoyed because they paid more for this cup and they haven't got their money back. Now, the reason people don't get their money back at Kendall is we do it as a hire scheme. So you hire a cup and then you just take back your empty cup to the bar and you just swap it for a clean one every time you get a drink. But obviously, if you're stood right at the front waiting for your favourite act to come on, you're not going to walk all the way back to the bar with your cup. You're also probably going to you're probably doing rounds because you're British. So then you've got like 3 or 4 cups stucked up. And so then you've got too many cups. You don't need that many cups. So we were like, okay, so this is actually like, this process doesn't even work for somebody. So we just introduced something really simple, which was a cup token scheme. So we have our sustainability impact crew with cup token signs that walk around the main arena crowd. And if you've got an empty cup, you give it to them. They'll give you a tiny token, which you can put in your pocket and go back to the bar later and use it to swap over and get yourself a nice clean cup. It means that you're not walking around with loads of empty cups. Loads of cups aren't getting chucked on the floor. You can still do your rounds with your mates. You can hand those tokens in at the end of the festival, and we've usually got some like free samples from some of the sponsors to give away. And it just makes the whole process a lot easier for you as a customer. You can enjoy the band. It doesn't cost you anything. If anything, you're saving money because you're now not going up and buying like a cup every time you're going to the bar. Win-win-win for everybody. And then it's great for the festival because when everybody leaves at the end, there aren't thousands of cups lying across the floor.
Yeah.
So that for us was just like something which was easy and accessible. So easy, they're just swapping over a token with us. Accessible, it's not costing them anything to do it. And it's cool because when people were chucking their cups on the floor, people going, no, don't do that. The cup people are coming round in a bit. And they were like helping collect the cup. So it kind of created this like community feel. And when the cup people are walking around, with a long tower of cups, everyone's just loving it. So it just becomes like a fun moment of the event as well. So that's just one example of something which actually is now really sustainable. And we've got a really good high cup return rate, and it makes it experience better for the audience as well.
It's such a great example, and I think classically something in like a lot of things in sustainability. Initially, you're like, well, if we can reuse them, then we'll just replace them with plastic ones, and then actually the reality is that it's not as easy as that. Is there have you heard of in businesses, like not many businesses are events businesses, but a lot, may work from an office, say, or like other kinds of businesses. Are there any that are maybe more generally applicable that you've heard of that are also an example of easy, accessible, and cool?
What I do think about when I think of that, like you have to think about the actual audience as well, because for the Kendall audience, they needed that. There's some festivals you go to, you don't need the cup return scheme because that like the audience knows what they're doing. In the same way you don't need at Blue Dot Festival that they used to run, they didn't need people in the campsites telling people to take their tents home. Everyone was just doing it anyway. That was the vibe of the audience. So again, it's going back to those like material topics we were talking about earlier. It's like, it's not going to work for every festival. Every festival is different in the same way every business is different. But I do know one I heard from Carbon Literacy, which might be relevant to this, which is one office was saying, well, we're doing everything right, we haven't really got carbon footprint, and they realized actually that their waste was huge, that the amount of rubbish they created as a business was huge, because most people got meal deals at lunchtime. So they basically made a competition in the office of people would basically points win prizes, which is if you're bringing in your own packed lunch, you'd basically like get points to win prizes in the office. And it was just saving so much on the waste. Because if you think about a meal deal, like most of them are like a plastic bottle, a sandwich, like paper sandwich holder, and then a packet of crisps. So just lots of waste. Whereas people were just like bringing in their own drinks, or deliberately going out and getting something that would be recyclable. So if they were getting a meal deal, they would get points if they got a can rather than a plastic bottle. They didn't use they used the cutlery from the office rather than got fake cutlery from. So I liked that because it gamified the
Yeah.
something that actually I think the business was like a design agency or something. So you could be like, well, what clients do you have? What do you have? But actually, it was an employee engagement thing about how can we gamify something that actually, on reflection, this is something we're creating a lot of as a business. And we can all be a bit more conscious of our individual actions here, and that will make a real difference. So I quite liked that one. I thought that was good.
Yeah, I think gamifying makes it, as soon as people can joke about it and say that there's like if you're assigning a bit of oh, you've lost points then for bringing in something that's bad, then it makes it's not you're having a dig at them because it's unsustainable. You're having a dig at them because of the game, which makes it a lot easier to kind of name and shame in a nice way.
Yeah, exactly. And it was, and then it became something within the team, doesn't it? And it's like, not everyone's going to be able to cycle into work, but most people can bring their leftovers in a bag, So
Yeah. um last couple of questions. I'm interested on your thoughts on net zero.
then what does it even mean in regards to, like, what does it mean? Like, it's net zero just seems like just like a almost pointless goal for something which is basically saying this is our goal at the end, but we're not going to change any of the inputs really, but we're going to try and change the middle bit, which is like we want net zero to be the result. To get to that result, we're trying to change the systems and processes in the middle, but we're not looking at the beginning bit, which is why do these systems and processes exist in the first place, and should they be existing, and how do we stop the dam the flow of carbon emissions coming out rather than like try and reduce it. So I do know in carbon literacy we talk about mitigation and adaptation as the two things we need to do before looking at reducing emissions. But for those two things to happen, I think in reality, governments need to put in better legislation around what businesses should be doing. And I think the fact that Client Earth took the UK to court for a crap net zero strategy and won very easily. And if you talk to anyone in government, they don't really have an answer about what a net zero strategy looks like. And then they're coming out 6 months ago saying, growth, growth, growth. What's our target? Growth, growth, growth. And you're like, okay, well, that does not equals that. Like I'm not an economist, but if you're saying growth, growth, growth is what the British economy needs to be doing, and then you're also saying we need to have a strategy about how we completely reduce down our carbon emissions as a country, it's not possible. So I find it almost as annoying as we should just tax the rich, because that's also not going to happen. So can we start to come up with some practical actions about how we change things? Because net zero is a great concept, but if you're not putting anything behind it, it's just never going to happen.
Yeah. And it's far enough. Net zero, it's even funny to say 2050 is just like setting a goal 25 years into the future is like saying I'll lose weight when I hit 60.
Exactly. And it's also bearing in mind 25 years ago was when the internet came out for me, right? So if you think about how technology has absolutely fucking changed, like I can literally go into my phone and just like write this better, and copy and paste it in an email, and a little robot comes back and like writes a really good email for me, or a pitch deck. Even for Project Salt Run, I was able to upload the GPX files and say, give us a 100-day itinerary taking us to these cultural places, and it popped it out in minutes. So if you think about how tech is in 25 years has just exploded, in another 25 years tech and solutions will have exploded too. So should we be looking at net zero, or should we be more looking at consumption and behavior change, which is what I think we should be looking at? And that behavior change has to be more like majority behavior change, because saying let's tax the rich when the people in power who can make that change are the rich is not going to happen, guys. I hate to break it to you, but they don't want to be taxed, apart from Dale Vince. So like, do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
choose another argument, because you're just going to get yourself frustrated doing that, I think.
Yeah. I love his LinkedIn post where he's like, I need to be taxed. It's like there's no one else saying that. It's great. Yeah. Last question. So you said that you kind of started on this journey, sustainability journey, when you were around sort of 30. And I'd be interested to know what question you would ask and what you would say to you then, knowing what you know now.
No. I think that's a really good question. Knowing what I know now, I'd probably turn around to like Hannah then and be like, oh mate, you're going to be poorer. You thought you were poor now. You're going to have less money in 10 years time than you do now. And you're going to think that 10 more years of career, you'll be like sorted out, but you won't. But the only thing, if maybe not a question to that Hannah, but what I would say to that Hannah is trust your gut a bit more, gut a bit more. I think every bad decision I've made in business and in my personal life since then has been because I probably put my head or facts before my gut. And when my gut's told me differently to what's in front of me, and I've gone, well, that's in front of me, obviously I should do that thing. It's never worked out for me. So I guess that's, and that's the only piece of advice I would give. But who am I to give advice to anyone anyway? No one really. But certainly
I think your past self, it's the most
to myself, I can give a bit of advice to myself, and that would be don't try and I think also there's been times where I've made decisions based on money, because I thought I'll do that because it's better money, or I'll do that because we need the money in the business, and they've never been good decisions, and they've always actually been too quick. So I think my advice would be, just if you need to make a big decision, sleep on it. And also you might be presented with the facts, but if your gut's telling you something different, listen to your gut.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Hannah. I've absolutely loved this, and it's been super, super interesting. Where can people find out about what you're doing and follow along with Project Salt Run?
So Project Salt Run, which is like salt and pepper, Instagram keeps thinking I'm saying salt because of my London accent. So Project Salt Run is a 100 marathons in 100 days across Pakistan and India, taking place in I think 89 days now, probably obviously later when this podcast goes out. We're trying to raise £1 million for businesses and communities who are trying to make people and the planet more positive. That's projectsaltrun.com. So you can find me on Instagram or on LinkedIn. And then the Better Business Network, same, the betterbusiness.network, and that's on LinkedIn as well. You can find me in either of those places.
Huge advocate for joining the Better Business Network.
Thanks,
very
Rob.
happy member over here.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Really good to see you.
Thank you.